Hi, my name's Mark Payne from SFL Group. I'm here with Ian in Prep Room 1. Say hello, Ian.
Hi.
Good. And feel free to ask me questions. We're going to be looking at an interface by DS Pro called the Etherface. In fact, if I get Ian to show you what that looks like. And this is the Etherface. And what it does, it takes 3 AES50 inputs. So you'll see here I've got a Midas Pro 1. Obviously, I'm assuming you're kind of familiar with Midas, otherwise you wouldn't be interested in this interface anyway. So we've got 3 AES50 inputs, which you can see 1, 2, 3. Each one of them is 96K capable and has 24 channels. So effectively here we've got 72 channels of AES50 coming in, and it puts it all onto one proprietary Ethernet, which is Gigabit Ethernet, which you can see I've connected to my computer. So typical configuration is a Midas Pro 1, which has 6 of these interfaces. Remember, each one of them is 24 channel capable, so there's 72 channels maybe of I/O here, so we could be connected to our stage boxes. 72 channels at 96K coming into the interface. It then interfaces them onto one Ethernet, which we've got connected into a recorder machine, and this is the way in which we're going to be able to achieve virtual sound check. So the plan B is another way in which we could use this, is we could use it as an interface to Waves Multi-Rack Native, where you could have 72 channels of input and output into a 72 channel rack if you wanted to do that sort of thing. Other than the RPM Dynamics interface, which I've never used to be honest, it's an American interface which I think is quite expensive. In a very neat single unit, we've got this 72 channel 96K capability. We've done that previously in a number of ways. One way in which we've done it is we've used a Clark Technic DN9650 to configure and turn the AES50 into MADI, and then you can go into something like an RME MADI face, and then you can get the record in and out into the computer using USB. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, slightly more expensive, would again to be use a DN9650, turn it into MADI, and then you've got 2 completely different MADI worlds. So you could get 128 channels of MADI into this DigiGrid MGB, and then that turns that into Wave SoundGrid. Now, both of these things are quite expensive. You're going to need this unit and that unit. In this case, you're going to need this unit and that unit. They have compromises because the MADI world is only going to be at 64 channel if you're at 48K. So over here, using the DS Pro unit, we're at 72 channels at 96K, and it's all in one box. Now, this thing's going to cost you less than 900 quid as a single unit. So I think it's actually a really interesting, compact and economic interface. That's the general idea. I've taken the direct out of channel 1, and I've sent channel 1 out of all 72 channels. So it's just my quick and dirty way of getting noise onto 72 channels simultaneously. So you can see what that looks like in Logic. If I deselect that, you can see clearly that my channel 1 direct output is hitting all 72 channels of the record. I've record enabled 72 channels of audio here. They're all being routed from channel 1, but all 72 channels of AES50 are being used. I will turn on the send, and you can see that I am indeed recording 72 channels simultaneously at 96K. This is the settings for the Etherface driver. You can see that I'm using a buffer of 1,024 samples. That's very, very safe, to be honest. We can choose much lower buffers, which I will be doing when we use Waves Native. But for recording, this is blind recording in the live world, so there are no good benefits to having a low buffer size. We're not interested in latency. I'm not listening to these recordings. I'm just taking them to play back later. This isn't a very new MacBook. It's a MacBook Pro Retina, late 2013 spec. Hit record. Of course, my advice, if you're ever recording 72 channels at 96K, I'm always going to be wanting to do this on the internal solid-state drive. It's the most reliable way of going. you can see that doing a 72 channel live record really is no problem for Logic on the Mac. It's doing that quite simply. And so now my whole 72 channel 96K recording studio is an old MacBook Pro Retina and a single 72 channel interface from DS Pro, the Etherface. I recorded a bunch of pink noise individually on each track. Now, if you come over to the patching screen, you can see on a Midas board how I can arrange this is that all 72 channels which are here can be patched. That's channel 1. You can see that's being patched to channel 1's tape return. For example, channel 24 is patched to channel 24's tape return. Now, of course, a Pro One has got limited channel count. So although I've got 72 channels of I/O available to me, I can only patch 48 channels of them. Look, this is the 48th channel, which is effectively patched to the last of the auxiliary returns, and then I run out of board. So to swap the board over from the normal live mode to the tape returns, I go into the monitors and preference pages and just hit tape return. And you can now see that all 48 channels are live with pink noise, and to the point where I can't hear this because I don't have headphones on, but if I start to fade these up, you will hear the pink noise that has been recorded on each channel. That's probably underneath my voice. We're going directly into a record machine without a switch, but if you put a switch in place, you've got the option of having two record machines. One is a master, which is able to record and playback, so you can use it for virtual sound check, and the other one is a slave record machine, so if your program material is really important to you and you want to run a secondary record machine, you could do that also. Okay, so now into the second way of using it, which is to use Waves. Now, there are two real ways of using Waves multi-rack. One is to use it native, where the computer does the work. And the second way is to use it with a Wave server, where basically the performance required to run the plugins gets shipped off to a server. Of course, that's a more expensive way of doing things, and a very good way of doing things. And really, this, if you were doing that, you're going to be using an MGB. You're going to be using something like this. That's all well and good, but I can't quite remember. But when you consider this is about 900 quid, and this is another 900 quid, and then your Wave server will be another 1,000 something, you can see this starts to mount up. And so the point that I wanted to show you here is if you want to do this in an entry-level kind of way, then Waves Multi-Rack Native, where we run the plugins on the computer, is the way to go. And then you could use the DS Pro Etherface to get into there. Now, I will talk to you a little bit about latency. And if you've looked at my videos before, you will see I've done some very detailed study on analysing the latency of some of these solutions. So let me just say that if you like, my previous low-cost way of doing this was to use a DN9650 and an RME MADI-face, and it's a really good interface to USB. And if you do that, you can realise a Waves multi-rack latency of about 11 milliseconds. That's the total return time to go through the Waves multi-rack and back out again. And to audio people, 11 milliseconds is about this length in distance 3 times. You know, we're talking about 3 meters of latency. So, you know, I know it's a joke because you listen to a microphone. If I walk over here, you know, Ian is now hearing me with 11 milliseconds of latency, and I really don't think that's going to upset him too much. So we don't like latency, and 11 milliseconds is starting to stretch into the reasonable amount of latency, but I'm not too bothered about it. Now, if you use a DN9650 and a Waves DigiGrid MGB in native mode, that's not doing the clever stuff with the server, you could get that down to about 8 milliseconds. Now, using the DS Pro interface, which I'm going to demonstrate to you, I can get that even lower into the 6 to 9 milliseconds in the native mode. By manipulating some buffers, I can either be somewhere between 6 and 9 milliseconds, depending on how much CPU resources I want to chew up within Nave's multi-rack. Now, if you like the ultimate way of going at the moment for a Midas in the Midas world, would be to use a DN9650 with a Waves MGB and then use a Wave server and do this in SoundGrid mode, and then you can get down into the region of 4 to 5 milliseconds for 3 times the price. And so these are the sort of compromises that you make. The other nice thing about using this DS Pro mechanism that I'm going to show you now is that we're doing all of this at 96K, and that's a nice thing to keep the quality, if you like, into the solution. I'm going to reconfigure the interface. I'm going to bring the buffer size down to 32 entries in the buffer, and that will speed up, if you like, any latency issues, and I've been doing this with no performance issues whatsoever. And now I'm also going to start up Waves Multi-Rack in native mode. All you're hearing on this microphone is just a little bit of channel compression that I'm doing here. So you can see it. I'm just doing a little bit of channel compression, and this DPA microphone is hitting up to, 5 or 6 dB when I get excited. The DPA microphone is channel 2. I'm actually going out of channel 2 of the AES50 interface, and that is being returned into channel 2's insert return point as well. You can see on my overview, the insert point is turned off. And so if we have a look over on the Waves multi-rack, you'll see that I've got a C6 compressor, which is in the insert channel, and you can see that that is actively working, but you're not listening to it yet because I haven't enabled the insert point. I'm going to turn the insert point on in 3, 2, 1, and now we're in the realm of listening to the C6 compressor that's running in Waves multi-rack. Out, 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 in, out, 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 in, out, out, out. Now, you're not going to see that. You can't see 6, 8 milliseconds of latency as a lip sync issue. So if you want to just check that out, this is with the effect out, out, out. This is in. This is out, out, out. This is in. Just to prove to you that we are inserted, because you're taking my word for it. You should have heard the change because the C6 compressor is compressing, but just to prove to you that that is the case, if I come over to the rack and I dip this out, you should hear this go down by 18 dB and then back up to 0 again. I'm doing this blind so I don't hear what you hear. Is if I look at preferences, you can see that I'm using a buffer size of around 128. And if you look back at the board, you'll see that with a buffer size of around 128 in multi-rack, we're going to get around a 9 millisecond latency time. If I return that buffer size down to 64 entries and just reset, then we will decrease the latency down to 6 milliseconds. But if you have a look here in this where the system resources are being shown, Ian, I don't know if you can focus in on that. We're now using 44% of the system resources that we have available to us to run one C6 compressor and an H reverb. Now, I will admit that H reverbs are quite expensive on system resources, but my point being is I probably wouldn't run it that hard. I would go back into the settings, preferences, and I would release my requirement for ultimate latency somewhat and apply that and live in the world of 9 milliseconds of latency to come through my C6 compressor. And now I've halved you can see that I've halved the loading on the multi-rack native environment, and I could do a lot more things in the rack in that way. DS Pro interface then, if you want to get in contact with us and talk to us more about this fantastic interface, sales@sflgroup.co.uk. You know, I was so impressed with the interface, we decided to distribute it in the UK, and we've got together with the great guys from DS Pro. So give us a call and get in contact with us. You can find out more about SFL by going to sfl.live, and I hope this demonstration has been useful to you. I've been Mark Payne at SFL Group, and say goodbye to Ian. Goodbye, Ian. Thank you.